Hi, I'm Danny and these are my Diecast Disasters. In this video I've got this little Hot Wheels Subaru Brat. This red one is a 2019 model from the Off-Road Trucks set. And I'm going to be giving it a monster lift and rusting it up a bit. So let's crack into it. There's two posts holding it together, so I'll start by drilling those out. Now I can take the base off. I'm going to use this pick here just to pry it off of the posts. Right, there we go. So there's the chassis and the interior. Somebody's made a little home in there at some point. And then there's the windscreen and the body casting. So I want to make this body look a bit rough and pitted. So I've got a small brush here and I'm going to paint on some patches of paint stripper here and there. I'll apply it where I want it to sort of be pitted and dented. Alright, so I'll leave that for a couple of minutes and then wash it off, and that'll give me some patches without any paint on them. So next I'm going to take a jar and put some water and some hydrochloric acid in it. And so that's going to eat away at the metal where there's no paint. You could actually do this with just vinegar, but I think it'd take a couple of days. So I left it a couple of hours and I've rinsed it off and paint stripped the rest of it. So here it is. It's a little hard to see, but it's eaten away where there was no paint. So I'll give it a clean up with the wire brush. Get rid of all that oxidation. And here it is after a clean up, and you can see the pitting and stuff where it's eaten away at the metal. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to cut off the roll bar and the spotlights. There we go. Right, now I'll give it a clean up with the sanding drum. And finish it off with some sandpaper. Next I'll move on to the chassis. I'll just pop those old wheels out. We're not going to be using those. Next I'm going to want to get rid of all that chrome on it. So I've got some hot water and some caustic soda. I'll just drop it in that. Leave it for a minute or so. All the chrome will disappear. And there we go. Looking nice and clean and black. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is take off those axle bays underneath. I'm going to start by cutting off a slice of this epoxy putty. I'll knead that up. And I'll use this to fill up the axle bays. And there we go. I'll leave that for about half an hour to fully cure. And once it's nice and hard, I can use a sanding drum to sand off the axle bays underneath. Axle casings, whatever you want to call them. Once I had most of them off, I finished up with a file to sand the base flat. Right, so now that's nice and flat, and I've got a raised lift kit here that I've downloaded from Thingiverse, and I'm going to be able to stick this chassis straight onto it there. So the whole reason I'm actually doing this build is that my resin printer is down and out while I wait for a new part to turn up, so I've had to print this on my filament printer. Here you can see I've chopped out the front and rear axles. I'm just going to rebuild those. So yeah, the filament printer is definitely not as good for printing small things. It's limited by the sort of size of the filament that comes out, and also the printings need a lot of tidying up, especially to make them look okay in this small scale. So there, I've made some new diffs and axles out of some styrene rod and some brass tubing there. So I'll just plonk the body on there. Oh, stay on there. You can see how it's coming along. Here is the interior, and I'm just going to have to chop those little posts off. Hold the wheels in place because, of course, we've filled up the axle bays and ground them off. So just using a craft knife to do this. Getting back to why I was doing this build, I was working on a Hot Wheels super rig It's like one of the last ones I hadn't done, but a lot of it was involving detailed castings with my resin printer, so I can't keep working on that at the moment until that printer's back in action. So there's those nice and flat, or reasonably flat. You can see that rear tab piece there sticking out as well. I'll have to cut that off. Right, so that's all trimmed up. I'll just test fit it. That's all fitting together nicely. And I just finished off the chassis with some new side pipes there. And I put a front drive shaft in. It was missing before. So I've just made those pipes out of some styrene rod and some aluminium tubing. And there's how it's all looking so far. I did toy with going post-apocalyptic with this from here, but I kind of think it looks pretty cool just like it is. So it's time for some paint. Gonna start out with a base rust coat on this body. So here I've got a dark brown and a rattle can, and then an orange brown, which I'm just going to fire lightly over the top while it's all still wet. And those two colours will just sort of blend in together and make a nice rusty looking base. Next I'm going to make it a bit more interesting looking, so I've got some red brown, some rust. The label's worn off there, but it's a rust effect. And some German red brown. I'll put a drop of each of these on some paper. And then I'm going to use a little piece of dry sponge to apply that in a stippling fashion all over the model. Just sort of mixing up the three different colours. And when you finish, it dries up and looks quite rusty. So once that was dried, I next used some liquid mask and some masking tape to mask off the bonnet and the doors. And now I'm going to use a fresh piece of sponge and some white and red paint and apply some in the same method pretty much that I did for the rust, and in so doing I'll leave a chipped looking sort of paint job. So there's the red applied all over. Now I can start to remove the masking, and I know the masking tape's pulled off half of the paint from the bonnet. So that's a bit of a pain, but we can work around it. So I'm just going to use my finger to gently rub off the liquid mask from the doors. Hopefully this won't take the undercoat with it this time. There it goes. And where there's a bit of it sort of stuck in around the wing mirror and the window there, I'm just using a soft piece of balsa wood just to sort of get in there and scrape that last little bit of mask off. So here I've masked the two sides of the bonnet and repainted it with some rust. And now I'm going to use the sponge technique again, but I'm applying white this time. Sorry, I'm a bit out of frame here and out of focus, but you get the picture. So just applying white and rust until I get it looking how I like. And then I mask off each of the doors one by one and do those with the white as well. And here it is once I've done both doors and the bonnet. Next I'm going to paint all the details. So I did all the black parts first, and then the silver, and then the rear lights and indicators with some clear red and orange. And next I'm going to use a black wash and just pin wash all of the panel lines. And once all of this had dried thoroughly, I hit it with a coat of matte clear. Onto the chassis now. I'll start out with a coat of black primer. Then I painted it silver. I'll apply a black wash all over that. Here I've detailed that bull bar at the front in black. And then I'm going to hit the whole thing with some Vallejo rust texture. It's like a dark brown rust. And just a lightish coat all over. And here's how that looks after it's dried. I've got some, I think this is light titanium weathering powder here. Doesn't really matter too much, you could use any sort of silvery one really. And I'm going to apply that onto the side pipes just to lighten them up a bit. And I'll apply a little bit more rust around the top of the chassis here where it's going to touch up against the body of the truck. And again, this was finished with a matte clear. Here's the interior. I've hit that with a white primer and then painted it red. And then I detailed it with black seats and a dash, etc. And I put a black wash on there and also a little bit of rust on the deck at the rear there. Here are the wheels I'm going to use for it. These are those limited edition green light ones. I don't know if they're making them anymore. I'm not liking those shiny rims, so I've just masked them off there. And I've hit them with a dull silver, I think that is. We could use a chain metal, or gun metal. I'll give them a black wash. And once that had dried, I've painted all the hubs in red. And I'm just going to finish them with a bit more rust on my sponge. Mainly around the outside of the rims. Once those are dried a bit, I'll just pull the masking off. And there we go. And I painted the rear of them, or the inside of the rims, in black, so it was also a bit shiny. Here's the windscreen. I'm just going to cut the rear off of that. And so I think that's just about it. Here are all the parts after we've repainted and customized them. Just have to put it all together. So these wheels just press onto the axles. Now this one wheel was actually pretty stubborn, it didn't want to go on. Now be careful when you're pushing them like this too, because you can just break the plastic axle part on the inside of the wheel. Anyway, it wasn't pressing on, so it's just off camera here. I'm just sort of twisting it to get it on there. So there's the wheels on. Next I've just got to assemble the top of it. So there's the windscreen and the interior. And then I can pop the chassis on. Those of you who are eagle-eyed might notice that I think the rear wheels are on backwards. I did notice that, and I turned them around the right way. So there's a button head screw holding the front in, and I had to cut off this other one to screw the back on, as that was a really short post. I'll tighten that up, and there it goes. And I'll just wait for the reveal to show you it all put back together. But just before we do that, we'll take a look back at what we started with. Here is our little red Subaru Brat. Not looking too bad there in that paint job. I'm not keen on those brown wheels though. But a cool stance and all. But of course we like things looking a bit rougher around here. Let's see what we can do. And here it is, our finished custom ratted style monster Subaru Brat. Or maybe it's a Subaru Rat. Anyway, it's got that big lift kit on it and those cool big monster wheels. It's been well rusted out. I've kept it red, but it's got that cool white doors and bonnet now. I think they make it pop a bit more. And of course we've painted in all those details inside and out. The new side pipes. I think it'll be a pretty cool beast to take for a blat around the farm. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Before I go, I'll throw out a massive shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. And an extra shout out this week to my newest Patreon, Texas Diecast Customs. Thank you, Texas Diecast Customs, for supporting the channel. He's got his own YouTube channel. Some more cool diecast content on there, so go and check that out. Thanks heaps to you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you want to see similar stuff, you can always subscribe, click the bell, give the video a like. You can check out the main page for the channel where there's heaps of other videos like this. There's links down below for my Patreon and my other channel where I do some sim racing stuff. and a link where you can get some cheap super glue. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.